Guys, I want to let you guys know that I am consistently inconsistent. Now there are some days I'm feeling great and some days I'm really just not feeling that good. And so some days I actually pour faster, some days I pour a little bit slower. So here's 3 criteria that I look for when I'm brewing my coffees to make sure I always have a consistently great cup of coffee. If you guys are new here, my name is Vincent and I'm the head roaster for Tails Coffee. And if you love educational and experimental videos, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification so you can get the latest updates on my newest techniques. Now in my shop, I actually only do pour overs, so being inconsistent can be a bit of a problem. Or is it? Now if you think to like some other industries or whatnot, like if you look at like the food industry, especially when you have great chefs, I'm pretty sure they don't actually just weigh everything and time everything like to the second every time. When they tell me it's a pinch of salt, sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's more like a handful. You never know what they're trying to interpret. But the thing is, they always have a great dish for me. So I really appreciate that. And you don't actually have to be perfect to always brew the perfect cup of coffee. It's not like we're always gonna be brewing at that perfect 6 centimeters, 8 centimeters above our dripper, pouring at 4 milliliters per second or whatever it is. We're gonna have some inconsistencies and we're gonna be able to work around that. So I'm gonna show you guys, talk to you guys about the 3 different criteria that I look for when I brew my coffees. The first suggestion I have is to actually fix the amount of beans you'll be using in every coffee. So this means if you decide to change your ratio between a 1:10 and a 1:15, your grinds and the grind weight should always stay the same. And that's actually to do with a density issue. Now, if you were to, let's say for example, always use 20 grams of beans, it will always be sitting at the same height in the dripper. And this really matters a lot more because sometimes when you have less beans or more beans, it drains a little bit differently and it affects how the first drip comes out, which is actually very important. If you use less beans, the water tends to drip out a little bit quicker. And that could actually create a little bit more of an under-extracted flavor and a little bit of a thinner coffee. And so if you don't know how to make the necessary adjustments with your pour technique, you might actually have difficulties controlling the flavors of the coffees that you're looking for. So my actual suggestion would be to keep a consistent amount of beans in there. So I like to use 20 grams. I use 20 grams for everything. But if my customer wants a stronger coffee, I just do like a 1:13 or 1:12, so we finish at 240 grams or 260 grams of water. Yes, the cup will look a little bit smaller, but I serve my cups in like dine-in cups, so nobody really notices. And if you're brewing for yourself, it actually creates a much better experience because every day you're gonna be using the same amount of beans, the water is gonna react the same way, and it's gonna be a little bit easier for you to control and create that consistent cup of coffee. The second suggestion that I have for everybody is to make sure that they set their filters properly. I want you guys to kind of get into a good routine that allows you to start your coffees. And that's because sometimes when I'm super busy or whatever it is, I'm switching between customers, talking to the left, talking to the right. Sometimes my hands are gonna be a little bit shaky, but when I set my filters, it gets me into this mood of making the coffee. Now, just keep in mind, I've talked about this before, but the Hario V60s, the filters don't actually fit their drippers perfectly. I've seen in my comments that some of you guys have found ones, but my untapped filters, these ones, you actually have to fold a little bit more at the top and then you set it. So once you get it in and once it looks perfect, I naturally feel a little bit better about myself and I'm ready to brew my coffee. And that is another way that I control my consistency.
Oh, I didn't see you there. Probably because you have no hose with you. And you probably have no hose on your meat stick. If you had a giant meat stick like me, maybe you have some hose. And you wanna know how I got this huge meat stick? I bought the single pour coffee from Tails Coffee. So make sure you use code NOHOSE for 15% off if you wanna get some hose. See you next time, bye.
So the last and third thing that I wanna tell you guys is to make sure to press all your grinds down. Now this is a little bit of a newer thing for a lot of people. If you haven't watched my sink or swim video, I've actually also shown in an experiment there what I'm talking about. But essentially, a quick recap is when you brew your coffees, a lot of the darker coffees or the grinds start floating up. And because I'm only doing a single pour, a lot of it actually floats up. Now, for people who do blooms, you cause enough agitation to actually slow that process down. But when you're pouring and when you brew, a lot of the grinds actually lift up. And during the pour itself, a lot of it lifts up. And it really depends on the type of beans you're working with. Some of the coffees naturally give off more gases, which in turn lift a lot of more grinds up. And so they float to the top and they're dark and the particles that just stay up there. And if you don't use agitation to kind of press it or push it down, it'll just always float up there. Now, when you have a lot of grinds when you finish your brew on the walls of the paper, that's when you have what I call the high and dry. There's just a lot of grinds on the sides. This used to be a very popular thing. It's because they said that these grinds on the walls are going to prevent side channeling, but this is not exactly true because the water kind of just flows through the bottom anyways. You know, make sure to press all the grinds down, because for me, when there's floating grinds, it just means the flavor has not been extracted. And in the Sink or Swim video, there was a Hario switch where I left the water in there first and I started pouring coffee beans on top. I left that up there for 7 minutes, and you'll notice that anything on the crust of the top, if it doesn't sink down, the flavors have not been pulled out. And that is because you can see that it is still a very clear dripper. It is still white with a tint of brown from a couple of the grinds that are floating down. But if it's floating on the top of the surface, you're not actually pulling the flavors down into the bottom cup of coffee. And so you want to be able to move out to make sure all the grounds have been pressed down. And that is how you know you've actually brewed and extracted all the flavors out of your coffee. So just a quick honorary mention, I guess it's like 3.5, 4 maybe. When I pour my first pours, I always like to start really low, and the reason is it creates the least agitation and creates the least pressure for the first drip to come out. I always aim for my first drip to come out as late as possible, because I think the way I like my coffees is to be nice and strong, and the first drip should be as strong as possible when it comes out. And so the longer it has exposed to the coffees or touching the coffee grinds, the longer it has time to extract the flavors. And so the first drip for me always has a stronger flavor. So I like to have a very strong first drip, but yeah, honorary mention right there. Good first drip. So here I am, guys, to show you guys a demo of what happens when you have an inconsistent brew filled with errors, okay? Now, I've just kind of dumped my grinds in here. I've set the filter out perfectly already. That was one thing that needs to be good. But if you kind of just like dump your grinds in and don't pack it like I normally do, I normally have that really beautiful stir and that little hole in the middle. Look, it's flat, okay guys? Flat, and it doesn't really matter. I'm literally just gonna brew from here. Like I said, you wanna pour nice and slow in the middle, and until you kind of just get your way to the edges. And this is because you want to make sure you want to saturate your grinds. Now, having that divot that I always do allows me to have a better saturation rate. Fills it in nicely, gets all the grinds up a little bit better. We're gonna work our way to the edges, and look, I can just pour like this and lift. Now sometimes, like this is a little bit over exaggerated, but even if something like this happens, we can fix it by making sure all the other properties have matched. Now, I can promise you guys, this is a slightly darker coffee. None of the grinds are floating. So we're just gonna give it a stir, as I always do, because I love to stir. And boom. Pretty easy to make yourself a good cup of coffee. It's gonna be good. Is it gonna be a great cup of coffee? No. But for most people that are gonna be drinking the coffee, they can't tell the difference. And if you're the one who can't tell the difference, then damn, I made you a bad coffee. But obviously, I'm never gonna brew that poorly. I'm never gonna be brewing in circles like this. I'm not gonna have those drippy droplets. But by hitting certain viewpoints or criterias, I can guarantee that this coffee will come out really good. So it's gonna consistently still be a good cup of coffee. It's just we can make errors in the middle. fixable. So as you guys can see, we're nearing the end and it's almost done dripping. I just wanted to let this finish and then show you guys what it looks like. You guys can see that there's nothing on the sides. It's not high and dry. You're gonna have a little bit of the finer fines just kind of sticking on the edges. And that's just a good indication that this is ready to be, it's a fully extracted coffee. None of the darker particles are floating on the top, nothing on the sides. So we've got ourselves a good indicator that this is gonna be a tasty cup of coffee. It's pretty easy. All we needed was to make sure we poured to make sure all the grinds have sank, and that's it. So here we are with the finished brew. I hope that, you know, by hitting these 3 points, it always helps you create a consistently good cup of coffee. We are imperfect people, we can make mistakes, so it does happen, but no matter what, this tastes great. It's just kind of what I imagined, it was what I was looking for. Of course, it's gonna be a little bit thinner, a little bit more hollow than I would have loved, and that's because during the brew, as you saw, there was a lot of abnormal movements from it. If you don't have such large abnormal movements, you're still gonna have a really good cup of coffee as long as you hit those 3 criteria. So make sure to hit those 3, and yeah. So if you guys like these tips, make sure to smash the like button. Thank you for all the support. If you guys have any questions, make sure to let me know in the comments. Does this help you create a more consistently good cup of coffee? Do you make mistakes when you pour your coffees in the first place? Do you find you're a little bit inconsistent? Yeah, chat with me. Let me know how it's going. And thank you for watching, and catch you guys in the next one. Bye.